the party that focuses on economics wins the next general election. The facts remain the same. We have struggled to grow the economy. So what the algorithms I think are pushing now is the narratives of cultural politics and what's not going well. Controversy, remember, sells way more than normal life ticking along.
We've changed Prime Minister a lot over the last 5 years. Here you go. So even if you're not a fan of Islam, I do think you kind of just gotta give it some time, man.
People often brand it as left or right. And I think that you can have both ends of the spectrum probably have their are advantageous, right? So I think you can like a little bit of everything.
Hi folks, welcome back to the podcast today, and we have a collaboration between myself and Javan Palmer. Javan, thank you very much for inviting me to your studio. I must say that the change of scenery today is because I'm in Javan's fantastic new studio called the Lodge Studios, which is based in East London. So for anybody who does wish to record a podcast, I do encourage you to get in touch because it's a really fantastic space. We have a vast array of topics today that we want to discuss, ranging from political issues to issues within maybe the Black community. So myself and Javan, I'm sure you've heard Javan say before, we are both Black Caribbean men. And funny enough, we're two Jamaican men too. And I feel like that's something that you don't really
It's a
hear.
rarity, bro.
Yeah, it's a lot nowadays. So I think it's to give everyone context of how this collaboration came about. I wasn't shy. I was the one that jumped into Javan's DMs and said, I think I asked a question regarding what camera he was using. Because I was very much appreciative of the content that he was making. He speaks on some really fantastic issues or topics. So I would say, please do. I encourage you to go out and check out his YouTube and his platforms. And it was through there that we started to engage in conversation. So this was actually long in the pipeline, but of course he's now become a famous man. He had reality TV commitments and all these things, but we finally made it. We're here. So Jaman, thank you very much.
Appreciate you having me, bro.
It's quite an interesting time in the UK political scene. We just had the local elections. And in that local elections, we probably now have confirmation that we are in a multi-party political system. And what we saw is the Labour Party lose over 1,200 seats. So maybe we should start with a little bit of a recap of exactly what happened across the UK political spectrum. In Scotland, we saw the SNP hold on to power, if you like, retain power there. And that's despite maybe some of the controversy they've been embroiled in. When you think of Nicola Sturgeon and her husband. And then they had Hamza Yusuf, who maybe that pro-Palestinian voice didn't really seem to reflect the Scottish electorate. But despite this, they are still there. Wales. Now this one is a real political earthquake. The Labour Party have held on or had control of Wales since devolution times, over 100 years.
I got power. Wow.
So this is the first time.
I did see that when you sent me.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I knew that, bro.
So this is quite this really is a political statement in terms of Welsh politics, a real shake-up there. Ironically, this is the home to some of Labour's most powerful leaders, such as Lord Kinnock. Don't forget. So that was something really different. And then if we come across now into the United Kingdom, if we start with up north, Barnsley, Sunderland, Labour Red Wall, absolutely hammered down and torn apart. Midlands, Birmingham, again a place, a Labour maybe stronghold. And we saw once again that the the castle was completely knocked down there. And we had a real multi-party split of in Birmingham, from Reform to Greens to Independents to Conservatives to the Labour Party, a real mixture. And then where me and you are from, London, where in inner London, if we start off with inner London, because that's closer to home to us, Lewisham went green. Lambeth, which is the council, the home of the housing minister, Steve Reed, they've lost control. Croydon, maybe the Labour Party thought that they would win there, but the Conservatives held on to power by the skin of their teeth in terms of that mayoral election. And then maybe if we go further out of London, you saw places, well, Havering went Reform, but places such as Barnet went Conservative. So we've seen a real split, a vast array across the political spectrum. And what do you think? Why are we seeing this new multi-party politics?
I think that there's two things that are going on in my mind, and that I was thinking during the lead up to the votes and elections, right? And I think that one of the first things is a lot of people are kind of fed up with the two-party system. I think people are just fed up of it in general. And I made a video on TikTok maybe 2 or 3 days ago, right? No, the day after like all the votes were counted up, and then we're talking about how Reform had done so well. You know, something that I said that seemed to annoy quite a lot of people, that had a lot of backlash, but there's something about Nigel Farage, yeah, that the left can't replicate, and he's charismatic. He is charismatic. He is, and he knows how to tap into people and their emotions. He's caught the temperature of what people are feeling, and he's amplified it, and he's speaking to what people feel. And people love something to blame. And he's been able to whip up a rhetoric that is giving people something to support. Now, you can say all these things. We don't know if he's ever going to deliver. We don't know. And proof will be in the pudding. But just from, obviously, I work in marketing, so I think of it from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
They say that the best marketers speak at an 11-year-old reading language. I'm not saying that the people that support him have 11-year-old reading level or reading ability, but what I am saying is that the way that he delivers his message is very simple. It's digestible. And there's something that I think people on the left struggle with, is displaying their points without. I think people on the left have this kind of like they have this complex. They feel like they're superior. Like they feel like, if you don't understand my point, you're bad or you're wrong. I don't think that there's enough. I don't feel like there's enough understanding and collaboration, because you're not going to get. Not everyone that supports Reform is a far right, Nazi. There's some people that are maybe a bit more centrist or a bit more centre right. Those people can still, they can be not converted, but they can be convinced. But I don't think the left does a good job of marketing to those people. So I think with that, alongside Keir Starmer not being very popular as well, I think there's like a mixture of things. The writing was on the wall for him. Not for him, or the writing is on the wall for him. We'll get to that a bit later. But I think the writing was on the wall for Labour over the last 6 months or so, just because of the way the mood is in the country, cost of living. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors. It's multi-layered. But I think Nigel Farage is one of the big reasons, in my opinion.
It's interesting that you started with Nigel Farage there, and you spoke about the left and the right, because when people think of Nigel Farage, they think of identity politics, culture wars. And you spoke about there, when people are feeling vulnerable, they're looking for someone to blame. And the fact that he may have tapped into, like what you said, the squeeze on the pocket, and then him saying it's because a very specific segment of the population, these are the people that you need to be concentrating your efforts and anger towards. I can see why you said that, but I want to play devil's advocate here, right? Because we are impartial. We are here to try and give people a balanced view. So I was having a look at some of the Reform Party manifesto, right? And in there, for example, I don't know how feasible this is to do, but for example, VAT threshold, they were looking to increase it from, if I'm correct, about 85k to 120k. They're looking to abolish business rates for 1.2 million SME businesses. The manifesto also talks about policing and crime. They want 300 frontline officers per 100,000 of the population. So my point is that, because a lot of us just scroll through social media, and all you see on social media when you're scrolling is something referring to cultural wars. But when you actually drill down into policy, I'm not saying maybe not the case for myself and yourself, but for people, maybe they are voting on policy and not just culture wars. Because, what we just spoke about there, you're a business owner. I mean, that's quite attractive.
That's why I was smiling, because I was like,
It's quite attractive, isn't it?
from a policy standpoint, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Like that VAT, that 20%. And even the small business rates. And we speak about, everyone, before the whole stuff around Dubai and the wars, a lot of people would talk about how England's losing about 1,000 millionaires a month or something like that. And they go to places like Dubai and stuff like that. And one of the reasons is because I always say that the UK is hostile to business owners. It's a hostile place for someone who's self-employed or a business owner. If you're self-employed and you're doing your own thing, or you're a business owner, it's a hostile country to be in. But then it leads me to some of the criticism, some of the criticism that people have for Nigel Farage and Reform Party is that a lot of their stuff is just to help business owners, millionaires, rich people. It's not really going to help the common man or woman. So this is something, again, this is why I think the left are not very, I've seen so many videos. I know it's just videos, but I'll listen to a lot of videos and hear people talk. And I think some people have this belief, it's funny you mentioned policy, but they have this belief that a lot of Reform voters don't actually read policy. I think a lot of people on the left think that the voters of a party like Reform don't actually go and do their due diligence and read up and learn about what's taking place, because they would argue that there are no policies that are going to help the common man or woman from what they say. So I think I wouldn't agree with that. I do think there has to be a section of people that have voted Reform that have read the policy. How could they've done so well? They can't just do as well based on saying all immigrants.
Wasn't this is exactly my point.
That would be impossible. But it's obviously we don't know. But what percentage of those people actually read policy? That's the next question.
That is very true. But let's look at another party then that also, I think that they did well. I think they expected to maybe eat away more at the left voting, like is the Green Party.
Yeah.
Now they had a major win in Lewisham. Zoe Garbett, if I'm correct, is the new mayor. That's her name. Apologies if I've said that incorrectly. I do apologize. I had a look at a little bit of their policy. Now, within Lewisham, just doing a little bit of research, affordable housing is a really big issue and topic. There seems to be rapid rates of homelessness. Social housing waiting lists appear to be increasing. And the Green Manifesto was a big part of it was centered around affordable housing and social housing. So maybe that kind of policy attracted people to vote for them in areas such as Lewisham and Lambeth. And I say that, does that bring us again to the point of when we're looking at this new multifactorial politics, and we have people have an understanding that it's very much driven by the cultures because that's what we see on social media. Are we now just being more granular? Are we now just being able to refine our taste buds a little bit like what we can do when it comes to television? Because before you had a choice of maybe Sky and Virgin as your TV box. Now we've got Sky, Virgin, EE box, BT box, and also if you only want stuff for your kids, then you just get Disney Plus. Maybe I'm someone who just wants to watch a really good series, then maybe you might go Netflix. But really, listen, you lot, if you are gonna go for just one, I would say Apple TV. Big up there from serious dramas. But as an example, Amazon Prime. So what I'm saying to you now is that are we just able to just be that refinement we're just seeing now in politics? Because I think, you know, people often branded as left or right. And I think that you can have both ends of the spectrum probably have their advantageous, right? So I think you can like a little bit of everything. So I think, are we also seeing that maybe some people are voting on what you might see more of a right party now, like a reform, but in 2 years' time, actually, they might go back to a more centrist policy or left policy? Are we seeing almost like dynamic pricing, where how you vote depends on your individual circumstances at the time, which because of everything that's going on in terms of the UK and geopolitically is rapidly changing?
I think people are a lot more politically fluid than they've ever been.
Yes.
So I agree. I think people have less affinity to the party and more to the politics. So when I say that, when I was young, you know, you got people that are just Labour. They're Labour through and through. You got people that are Conservative through and through. I think there's less of that, and I think it's more whoever's speaking to me. So for example, Greens are eating away at the left because, or not, they're eating away at Labour, sorry, the left of Labour, because Labour doesn't feel like a left party at the minute in terms of the way that it's being perceived. And I think a lot of that is down to Keir Starmer and the way that he's viewed. Because a lot of it as well is now being a politician is also like being a celebrity. So the way that you come across, the way that you talk, that matters, that holds weight as well. And I think that Keir Starmer doesn't really come across as the he doesn't come across as like opposite to reform. I think, and also here's a big thing that maybe made me think this. This was way before the local elections took place, but you know, there was a period where Nigel Farage was obviously getting even more popular with the reform, and he kept banging on about immigrants. And then Keir Starmer came up with the digital ID thing, and people were like against it. But there was, I can't remember I don't remember word for word what he said, but it was like he made a speech, and then he started going at immigrants, and it was like, oh, so you're only really saying this because Farage is becoming so popular. It kind of makes you look baseless.
I think I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it made him look baseless. And I remember listening to
You're talking about Thailand, the stranger's speech.
I can't remember. Forgive me for I can't remember exactly. But he came out of a speech and he was kind of going at immigrants as well and how they're going to be tougher on immigration. And it was like with Keir Starmer, I don't know. Are you left? Are you right? Are you a centrist? It just was like it felt baseless. So I think a lot of people that are in Labour who are a bit more on the left, they're seeing that and they're hearing that, and they're like, you know, the Greens is more my style. You know, the way that they're talking, the policies.
Yeah.
Zach Polanski is a great communicator. I think he's a good communicator, and I think also, I think he shouldn't have done any media before the local elections. I think he should have stayed away from media because some people say there was a smear campaign against him. You know, they're trying to Jeremy Corbyn. I said they're trying to Corbyn him right now. They're trying to do a Jeremy Corbyn on him. But I think because it's a local election, he should have stayed out of the media. I should actually because I think he had this press run, and I think it affected him. Well, affected the Greens because they were trying to quiz him. I know I'm going off topic here, but they were quizzing him and trying to do like gotchas on him about some of his national policies, but that doesn't affect the local. The Tory wasn't local, so I think he should have stayed away from the media to protect the popularity that they had. I actually think that they did play a role in the last 2 weeks or so. But yeah, I think the reason the Greens have done so well at eating at the left of Labour is because of Labour just feels a bit baseless. They don't feel like the left party anymore, in my opinion. Just as someone And to be honest, I've only really started to become more into politics over the last year or so. And you can see that change, you can see that shift. So I think that has played a big role, especially when we're talking about places like Lewisham, Lambeth, a lot of these inner cities, right, in London, where they're Labour strongholds. Most people will vote Labour in these areas, right? And in those places, a lot of people are kind of left-leaning.
Yeah, they are.
And they don't feel like Labour's providing that. Their policies don't feel very left at the moment. So,
Well, it's funny you say that, and I'm just wondering how much communication has a part to play. And I think you've kind of touched upon this because of the way that leaders like Nigel Farage and Zach Polanski can connect, right? Because there are some things that I think Labour have introduced which are really good. Okay, so Employment Right Act, abolishing 0-hour contracts, which is great when you need a little bit of financial stability. If you're maybe a part-time student, you just want to know that your 4 hours per week are set around you being able to study. I think that's a really good policy. Introducing statutory sick pay from day one. Some people go into jobs and they have some conditions. I'll say one like such as maybe lupus, which is something that you cannot control. And on the day that you start that job, you may have a flare up. So it's not your fault. So you should be entitled to stick to sick pay because that's outside of your control and you cannot control that. I think that's really good. I mean, Renters' Right Act, it's going to be controversial depending on whether you're a landlord or a tenant. But what I would say for tenants is that no fault eviction for everyone, actually, I think is a really good thing because no one deserves to be forced out of their home without any good reason.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And then we've got, NHS waiting lists. I think we'd all appreciate that maybe they're still not where we'd want them to be, accessibility to maybe appointments, but they are the lowest they've been in 3.5 years. So when you break it down like that, it doesn't actually seem that bad. There's some good things there, but it's not cutting free.
Why do you think it's not cutting through though?
Communication. I think that they are struggling to communicate with the electorate. And I don't know whether that is because that's the Prime Minister, because a lot of people, they will just say, I just don't like the Prime Minister. I just don't like him. And you ask people, but why don't you like him? And they can't really give a good answer. They just say they find him boring to listen to, very charismatic. So I think communication is maybe one reason. I think that a big one is the economy. Because our pockets are still squeezed, even though Labour have taken power. And I think they deserve a little bit of grace there. And we need to give everything some context, right? The bottom line is this. A lot of people were like, hey, furlough scheme. Good vibes now. Bro, how are you? I'm just chilling at home and I'm on furlough. Yeah, it was good then. Yeah, but you know what that was? Buy now, pay later scheme.
Yeah.
That was your Klarna. So now you're paying for it.
Yeah.
And they warned you at the time that you was going to pay for it. Yeah, because at that point, our borrowing, the UK's borrowing went through the roof. That's going to take a long, long time to repay and to balance the books. So I think people need to understand that, and they need to and be patient because that context, right? But ultimately, the bottom line is hard to think like that because people are emotional thinkers. They're emotionally driven. It's how they feel at that current time. And the bottom line for most people is that, well, I can't afford a home. Okay, I can't afford really to go on holiday. Wages are stagnant. If you're a graduate, the supply of jobs is squeezed. So ultimately, economically, people are either exactly where they were at the start of the pandemic, or some people are worse off. And ultimately, I think economics drives everything.
Yeah.
And I've been saying
That's true.
The party that focuses on economics wins the next general election. And I think this is a big one. It's because the Labour Party manifesto was vote for change. Growth, growth, growth. We are going to grow the economy. But ultimately, and it's not their fault. You have to understand the geopolitical situation too. We have to take into consideration when you're wars and, you know, what happens in America. But the facts remain the same. We have struggled to grow the economy.
Yeah, and what's the guy's name? He sits with his tea, Gary Economics.
Yes.
You know, he said something similar about, like, you know, when people don't have money in their pockets, like, no one's happy.
Simple
No
as
one's
that.
happy, bro. So it's true. It's true. And I think, regardless of Keir Starmer's shortcomings, I think if there was more growth in the economy, there was, you know, if inflation wasn't the way that it is, if the price of everything wasn't going through the roof, I think he would be able to survive what's happening to him right now.
Yeah.
I think there'd be more leeway. But I think, you know, we'll get onto what's happening right now soon. But I think that because of that lack of growth, regardless, it makes everything else more amplified. So any other shortcomings he has just looks way worse. But you mentioned grace, and there is something that we can't forget, is that we had 14 years of the Conservative government.
Yes.
In my opinion, I don't know. I don't know what they did. I don't know. There you go. Yeah. So I think it's a bit unfair to expect him to undo 14 years in 2 years. Like, it's like training in the gym, bro.
Absolutely.
If you've been eating custard creams and donuts for the last 20 years, you're not going to get in shape in 6 months, bro. It takes time.
Totally agree.
And obviously the economy and the physical body is different, but the concept is the same. It's not going to happen overnight. So I don't think, I'm not well researched enough to say whether West Streeting or Burnham, Burnham's name. I'm not well versed enough to say who I prefer or whatever, but we've changed Prime Minister a lot over the last 5 years. Here you go. So even if you're not a fan of Keir Starmer, I do think you kind of just gotta give it some time, man. You gotta give it some time.
Yeah, and I do agree with that too. I think on international matters, he's probably from what I can see in Parliament now, the best person for the job. I think internationally, he's dealt with it very, very well. He could have chosen to jump into war and in regards to Iran, and he chose not to. So in my opinion, he put country before anything else first. So I do think he deserves a little bit of praise for that too. And also, I think, remember, he's the figurehead. It's very easy to blame the man at the top. It's, but as we know, it's much harder to stay at the top than it is to get there. And you have to start to look at people within the cabinet and ask the question, you have been trusted by the Prime Minister to assist him in a certain segment of policy making and departments within the country. Have you gone at full speed? Have you gone fast enough and further enough in your specific segment to assist him? Because it's not all on him.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think we have to take that into consideration next.
Yeah.
And with that being said, what next for Labour? What next for them? Because
The timing of this.
there is huge speculation at the moment about where Labour goes from here. And one thing I've noticed, and we know what's happened. The local elections have happened. You've got a little bit of a bloody nose, albeit I understand it. Now, before the audits happen, we're going to take a step back. We're going to write an executive report on what's happened and think about what's next in terms of deliverables. That's how I think logically. We've gone from what's happened to emotional triggers to we're just going to change the leader. But that's how it looks, though, isn't it? And my thing would be, well, hang on a minute. What happened to the audit? Because when you have a bloody nose, you learn the most from failure. You learn from losses in the markets. That's when you learn. You don't learn when you're winning. You know, the data that you want to collect and absorb and understand is what's happened now. So this could be a blessing in disguise. But they seem to have, it appears they're going to skip this part and go straight to, we're just going to make a change. And that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, guarantee success. So if they do decide that they're going to have a leadership contest, shed some light on what names you've heard being thrown about, that you've thrown their axe into the ring, and what you think this could mean for the country.
Yeah, so you're right. That it's kind of just gone from, okay, they've had devastating losses with the local elections, and then it's like, okay, let's just get Keir Starmer out of there. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like, okay, but it's compounded by the Manderson scandal as well.
Yes.
So it's kind of compounded because it's like we was going through that, then the elections happened, and it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
So I don't think that even really, it was concluded, but that was still lingering.
Yes.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And that made it even worse for Keir Starmer. So his popularity was just in the gutter, and it just got worse. And then the devastating losses meant that, yeah, everyone's got their emotional hat on. I think that, so obviously West Streeton, what did he do? He resigned.
Yeah, he resigned his health
Secretary. Yeah, so I read his letter. Every time I've seen him talk, I feel like he's always wanted to be the Prime Minister. I don't know, the way he talks, yes. I feel like he's always wanted to be the Prime Minister.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with that.
So
yes,
I knew that's coming. When people were talking about it and that was a rumor, I knew he was going to do it. People were saying Angela Rayner may have potentially wanted to go for it, but I've also read that she might support Andy Bodybuilding if he goes for it. So it looks like he's going to go for it, but he's still got a hurdle to climb.
He needs to get into Parliament.
To Parliament. So obviously a lot does depend on that. But I think if he does get into Parliament, I think he will be more successful. I just read this morning that Keir Starmer's considering stepping aside to let Andy Burnham take over if he gets one. I don't know how true that is, but that was what I read on my way here. So I think if it's going to be West Streeton or Andy Burnham, I think Andy Burnham will win, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people within the Labour Party are very supportive of Andy Burnham. I think a lot of people are very supportive of Andy Burnham. I think with West Streeton, we might get a bit more of the same. And I think that is why people are more supportive of Andy Burnham. Obviously the proof will be in the pudding. There's still quite a lot of time. And then there's an argument that Keir Starmer might just dig his heels in and try his very best to stay, which by the sounds of it, that's also what he plans to do. So I can't say I have a preference, or I personally haven't really delved into it enough to say, but I think Keir Starmer's got a difficult job with his hands.
It seems so.
Yeah,
it definitely seems so. I would agree with that. My only thing with changing leader is when Labour spoke about change, you mentioned earlier about changing prime ministers continuously.
it's a lot under the
Conservatives. I think we've had maybe 4 or 5 in the past 5 years.
Crazy.
When you talk about change, one of the things I think the country wanted is stability and leadership. And maybe, again, we have to look at all sides of the argument, that people will say, well, isn't this just putting ego before country again, mainly? Because we have a leader. He's done some good things. He's competent, but not maybe massively popular at the moment. But they say a week's a long time in politics, and it certainly is. So maybe actually it's just egos. Here we go again. So nothing's changed. There's that argument too.
But why do you think that the British public have become so reactionary. Like, why are we so like, okay, he's not doing a good job, get him out of there? Because there's a lot of it's kind of crazy the amount of the amount of leaders we've swapped in the last couple of years. We're like Chelsea Football Club, bro. You're just switching. Yeah, bro. That can't work.
Because that's the society that we live in nowadays, and I think that's because of social media. Everybody thinks success is instantaneous.
Right. Okay.
Everyone wants everything now, and that's not how life works. Things take time. You know, you have to go through the rain and the wind before you get the sunshine, right? And we're living in this society where everything is very much snippet based. 1 minute clips on your phone, 3 minute clips on your phone, right? So what the algorithms I think are pushing out is the narratives of cultural politics and, you know, what's not going well. Controversy, remember, sells way more than normal life ticking along. So that's all people are being fed. And people really nowadays, they see the internet to them is like the Bible. It's like gospel to everyone. You know, when you talk to people and you go, I was watching this video the other day. No one ever says, well, I read this column in the Times or the Telegraph. Yeah, you remember like your grandparents back in the day, you know, they go to the shop, go to the corner shop, or Julian, go and get me a paper and, you know, get me some milk every Sunday. Does that happen in you? No. The elders might do it, but the school generation, they don't do it like that. So everything is results based, fast and quick. And I just don't think things work like that. And I think that's the reason. It's the speed of change that people want to see.
Yeah. I think we don't have that. We don't have the ability to just have that delayed gratification. So we're not giving the man up. Well, people will argue that, okay, it's had 2 years and not a lot has changed in 2 years. But you just laid out some of the policies and things that they have put in place that have come in over the last 2 years. And also, it's not just him. There's only so much he can do as an individual. So, yeah, I actually, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually think that you've got to kind of let him run with it for a little longer, man.
Yeah.
I think you could have the leadership contest, but I do think that we should let him run with it for a little bit longer, in my personal opinion, because now we're going to change again.
Yes.
Now it's a whole new regime. You know, people are going to be hiring the people that they want on their cabinet. Like, it's just.
But here's another thing. Have you thought about this? A left-leaning prime minister goes into Downing Street. The financial crisis worsens. Essentially, the Treasury are told, well, you need to raise more money, and that means more taxes. The bond market reacts badly to this news, and then you're in a position of a general election 2027. It's not unreasonable, is it? There is that element that you need to think about, because what you also need to see is that if you look at what the bond markets, how they're reacting to the news, well, it's not pretty. And I remember a certain Mr. Farage saying we're going to have a general election in 2027. Yeah, he has said that. It's not far-fetched. So sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, because it's not just the electorate that will decide on who is a prime minister. The markets will decide who will be in charge. And we saw it with Liz Truss. If they do not like what you are pitching, unfortunately, the writing will be on the wall for you.
Farage wants there to be a general election there. He wants that because he knows right now. But to be fair, I also read that, you know, although because of the way all the votes are split, just because Reform done so well locally doesn't mean that on a national scale they're going to go out and win a general election. And also, I just lost my train of thought there. Also the voter turnout is a lot different from a local election when it comes to national election. So I do think that I think that if we were to have one next year, Do we really think Reform would win a general election right now? I don't know.
I think it's really,
It'll be tight. I think it'll be quite close.
it's really difficult to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yes, they make inroads in Wales and they made inroads in Scotland, but they didn't win either of those two places.
Right.
And they didn't win London and they didn't win Birmingham. So actually, when you really break it down, you're looking at a hung parliament.
Yeah.
That's what you're really looking at.
Yes, exactly.
That's, or based on what we could see at the moment, that's what I would say is happening. And I'm gonna push on a little bit of on this topic. So that comes to the point of identity. So if what next for Labour? If they change leader, do they need to establish again an identity, a mission statement of who we are? Because I think you touched on when you spoke about, and we probably will talk about it in terms of a political home that a lot of people feel homeless. So what is their identity? Where do they really stand when it comes to business, when it comes to socialist aspect of the vote? I don't know. You know, we're asking, we'd love to hear your thoughts too, in terms of you listeners. Where do they go from here?
The thing is, yeah, the party is so different to when Jeremy Corbyn was in control, right? And like, it just, the political message, at least when Jeremy Corbyn was in control, whether you liked him or didn't like him, you kind of knew it's a left-leaning party. You just knew it was pretty clear. He wasn't afraid to say, and I think that's also why Zach Belatsky is so popular. I hate to keep them back to him, but there's a reason why he's popular. Is he's talking that talk, man. So I think, yeah, Labour need to establish what kind of party they are, but the problem is they're going to have difficulty, but if they're trying to split themselves between all these different camps. Yeah, they're trying to split themselves by trying to attract people from Reform, but then they also want to make sure they get the people that they lost to the Greens, right? And you got to be careful doing that, because you can't win over everybody. Yeah, it's just no one's perfect, right? So they can't win over everybody. So they really need to find their identity. They need to find a middle ground in which they really have their base, and then they need to be very firm and very clear in the way that they communicate what they're able to do and deliver, and then they have to deliver. Yeah, I think whatever does happen over the next 6 months in terms of leadership changes or whatever, whether Keir Starmer stays or he goes, whether it's Wes Streeton or Andy Burnham, whatever happens, whoever takes Keir Starmer's spot, or if he stays, over the next 6 months to 12 months, they have to deliver. Or else it's going to be problems.
Again, yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. And that brings me on to something else. And when we talk about this split,